Good morning, everybody. This is the Top Performance Strength Podcast. I am Kip Steingart, joined by Bill Miller and Declan Peterson. What's going on this morning, guys?
How we doing?
So, all right, fellas, so we're going to get right into it. So, with fall ball wrapping up over the next couple of weeks, right, we're right around the corner to getting into full off-season mode until high school baseball starting up in March. So, we got about a good 5 months ahead of us of solid off-season training. So, let's talk about what should players do right now that fall ball is ending here in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, and so something that we've talked about over the past couple of weeks with our fall ball podcast and our recovery podcast, we talked about how stressful fall ball really is and how it's sort of underrated in terms of how fatiguing a lot of these days are for these athletes. They have 4 or 5 games on the weekends, and then they got to come in here and train 3-4 times a week. And then you pair that with school and all these other things they got to do. It's a very hectic schedule. So what you're probably looking at is a lot of kids who might have lost some training qualities, such as those physical qualities of strength, muscle mass, things like that. But you're also probably looking at kids who have thrown so much, they might start running into some joint laxity issues. And so I think the first thing that you're probably going to want to start with is that assessment. That assessment is going to be your foundation for everything that they're going to be doing in the off season, and then obviously making sure that athletes are really looking at their current throwing plan, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and seeing if you really need to be throwing right now or if you should be focusing more on other qualities.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think another thing that players have to do, right around this time is kind of evaluate and see where they're at. For some guys, especially with the whole situation with COVID, playing fall ball this year in particular, I think was good, especially for guys to get, extra at-bats, innings, maybe play a few different positions and get your bearings after losing so many at-bats with complications from COVID. But I think a lot of it really starts with realizing where you are at and where you want to be.
Yeah, exactly, right? So that's where everything starts with our assessment process as we sit down and have a Q&A and we discuss goals. And for the majority of these guys that we're working with in the fall right now, I'd say I've worked with about 5 or 6 of them over the past year or so. So I have a pretty good idea of what their starting point was, and they've already had the foundational training. So they're in a much better position now where they're going to be more successful going into this offseason as far as being able to build upon that foundation as far as mobility and strength and speed and power. So the gains are going to be able to come that much more efficiently over the course of the offseason. But what about for guys that we just started working with over the last 4 or 5 weeks now? And like we said, we're going to be wrapping it up next week. What's kind of the main things that we need to continue to focus on and build upon over the next 5 months? Obviously, we don't want them taking any time off, that we've made this much progress over the last 5 weeks with 1 week remaining. So where do we want to continue to go from here to continue to build upon those physical qualities and get them fully prepared by the time the next season comes around in the spring?
Yeah, I think probably the driving topic of the day is going to be like, should we throw more? Should we throw less? And what should we be focusing on in the weight room? The reality is, it is extremely difficult to focus on everything and see all those qualities improve. So by that I mean you can't lift really hard in the weight room, expect your deadlift to go up 50 pounds this month, and pull down twice a week, and throw a bunch at high intensity, and hit a lot, and sprint a lot. You can't do everything. You're going to get burnt out. And that's what we talked about last week in that recovery podcast. So what I do think you have to do is really start looking at strength training as the foundation. That's where we're going to build your base. As we get closer and closer to the season, that's where we start sprinkling in a lot more throwing, a lot more high speed work and stuff like that. So understand that is going to always be the end goal, improve your power for your sport and stuff like that. But that can take a little bit of a back seat to these other qualities that you've probably lost. As I mentioned, I would be willing to bet most kids this fall did not put on weight. And that's unacceptable for a high school kid to go 2-3 months without putting on weight. It shouldn't happen. You should be putting on some sort of muscle mass unless you're a very, very heavy set kid. And then obviously, when it comes to all the throwing that you have to do in fall ball, dealing with those joint instability issues, it's just running an extra risk if you try to throw a lot this time of year. So from my perspective, I would say for a lot of guys, if you have a good throwing routine that you like to do on a daily basis, keep it super simple. Keep it to just your warm-up, your band routine, your plyo ball reverse throws, and then maybe 15 to 20, 50, 60% effort throws. That's it. Nothing intense, because the more you push the intensity with throwing or hitting, the more it's going to take away from your ability to really hammer at those weight training qualities that we want to train.
Yeah, I think a lot of it just comes down to prioritizing which qualities you want to train the most. If we take myself, for example, I'm in a little bit of a different situation, being a professional baseball player now and having just graduated college, and I know that my weakest tool is arm strength. So I'm actually continuing to throw all throughout the off season, but instead of throwing every day, I'm throwing high effort 2 to 3 times a week. And I've also cut way back on my sprint volume and the level of volume when it comes to my hitting, so I can prioritize my weakest tool, which is my arm strength, and then prioritize my strength training and gaining back range of motion, stability in needed areas. But like Bill said, you can't overdo it and try to fill your cup up with too many adaptations, or else you're either going to get such a small reward for all your work, or at the end of the day, you won't gain any of those adaptations because you're just trying to accomplish way too much.
Yeah, again, right? And everything is stress, right? Whether it's physical stress, mental stress, emotional stress, right? You got to know where you are as far as where are those buckets being filled, and you could without a doubt fill up too much of that physical stress bucket to the point where it's kind of overflowing, and now that's where that wear and tears are going to start taking place because of too much workload. So it's always going to come back to what do we need to prioritize, and then from there we need to be able to create a plan and execute on a daily, weekly, and a monthly basis. So Bill, you had mentioned earlier that a lot of guys that whether you're a loose guy or a stiff guy is going to be dependent upon what our approach is with you in the weight room, but also what we do from a recovery standpoint, being after a workout or after throwing, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago. So first and foremost, get in for an assessment so we could determine where you stand as far as your individual body type is concerned, and we know what the proper approach is to take with you. But we know a lot of guys over the course of a season, right? And most of you guys have been playing since the spring through the summer into the fall. So we're looking at about a 7 or 8 month season at this point. You've probably developed maybe a degree of laxity, especially if you are a guy who already is lax and has that ability to get into extreme ranges of motions or positions. So again, our approach with you is going to be vastly different than somebody's who's a little bit stiffer. So for somebody who is a little bit stiffer, it might be a better idea for you to kind of shut things down over the next month as far as throwing is concerned, and work on improving your mobility. So what do we think as far as what kind of our approach is going to be there? Because we know, right, the analogy, you can't train for all these different qualities as far as getting stronger, getting faster, getting more powerful, improving velocity at the same time.
Yeah,
right?
and so I think you really hit the nail on the head there. Just breaking guys down as simple as it is between a loose mover and a stiff mover.
Yeah.
Somebody who needs stability, that loose mover, or someone who needs more mobility, that stiff mover. So you can train both of those guys through a lot of the strength training that we are going to be doing with you anyways. You're going to train for those qualities that they need. For that loose mover, if you just keep throwing, you're probably not going to see great velocity results because you already have the layback. You already have that huge range of motion that you need when you're throwing a baseball. So improving on that probably will come about from improving the ability to decelerate better. So improving those strength training qualities, especially those areas in the torso, the rear shoulder, areas just in general throughout the body, improving overall strength is going to improve your ability to decelerate. So now when you do start throwing again, maybe in December, you're going to look at all those throwing qualities are going to improve, your velocity is going to improve, your arm health is going to improve because of what you did in October and November. But for those stiff movers, it's really interesting because you'll see those guys also improve their velocity, because rather than just focusing on sheer force to try to throw the ball, they begin segmenting their throws better, because from the floor all the way up, from their ankles, their hips, their T-spine, everywhere is more mobile, and they're able to move better. So now when they start throwing a baseball again, after 2 months of training with us in the weight room, they're going to be able to move so much better that it's going to be an easier time for them to improve that throwing velocity. So understand that all types of athletes can improve over the next 2 months with their throwing velocity without having to throw a whole lot. But now, I guess an interesting topic of conversation, one that we talked about off air a couple days ago, was for a kid who does have a showcase coming up. Let's say they have a showcase in December. My perspective is I would still probably shut them down from throwing for at least 4 weeks, because you are going to have enough time in November to then ramp them back up, and they should be able to achieve some sort of baseline level of velocity. But if you are somebody who has not signed up for a showcase yet, I highly recommend not doing a December one, because those suck. We've talked off air about like the people we know from PBR and stuff like that. Some of the numbers are atrocious in December, man. Like the average fastball velocity last year at a PBR event in, I think it was December 14th or 15th, the average fastball at the event was 77 miles an hour. I don't know the average. So I don't know any kid who's going to throw 77 and get a Division I or Division II scholarship offer or anything like that. So you're just looking at a majority of the kids who come out in December and just waste their time, waste their money. So I do think that if you haven't signed up for any winter showcases, avoid the December ones. Give yourself some time to actually train for these qualities, and then maybe in January, late January, maybe even right before the season in February, that would be a better time to showcase yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a much smarter approach. And I wasn't what you would call a showcase kid growing up, like in high school, but I did go to my fair share of ones. And I think that's good because, it takes a little bit to get used to what they're like, and understanding how to control your nerves, and, just feeling more comfortable. But going to one right in the middle of towards the beginning of your off season, like November, December range, is not the smartest approach. It'd be much better to do one, like Bill said, towards February, even into March, right before your high school season starts. That way you can get a good block where you can, maybe take time off from throwing or hitting if you need be after fall baseball, if you are playing that. And then as you're ramping up towards your season, going to a showcase, it just makes a lot more sense. But I think just like a little tip, and this could be a little bit subjective from my point, but a lot of kids go to these showcases and they're definitely not ready. You need to be doing, if you're going to go to a showcase, you need to be doing one of three things. You either need to be hitting the ball off the tee exit velocity at least 90. If you're a pitcher, you need to be throwing the ball at least somewhere around 85 or harder, and running at least a 6.8 or faster 60. I'm not saying you have to do all those things. It's great if you can do all those things. That's amazing. But if you can't do any of those things, like I couldn't in high school, at the end of the day, it was more so a waste of time over the winter. So in this area, I think a better route to go would be, if you can, try to find showcases sometime between your spring to summer season where they take place outside and you can play in live games. With that, you can get more exposure. Maybe if you're a guy who's kind of a diamond in the rough and you don't really have all the tools put together, but you can play really well in game, you can showcase your ability in that way instead.
Yeah. I think the three of us are pretty much in agreement that showcases are a pretty bad idea in the off season, right? And your time and attention should be focused elsewhere as far as developing physically and your athletic skills. So that's pretty much a whole nother rabbit hole we can go down, and a whole nother topic of conversation we could reserve for our podcast in the future. Yeah. But kind of getting back to what should we start addressing. So for your guys that are less advanced and you're kind of at that novice or beginner level stage of training, get in for an assessment. We want to get a baseline as far as where you are, so we have a better route as far as where we want to get you to be. But let's talk about like some of the performance metrics that we can be taking this early in the off season. So whether we're looking at acceleration, top end speed, whether we're looking at rotational power. Bill, you want to kind of discuss some of the things that we look at from a performance metric standpoint, some of the key performance indicators that we want to address over the course of the offseason, and then how we're going to go about doing that with certain individuals.
Yeah, and I think what needs to be understood is like, okay, so we're going to shut you down from throwing at high intensity over the next month, maybe even 2 months, depending on how you move and stuff like that. But understand that we are still training those physical qualities, and that's going to show up in these key performance indicators. So something like a medicine ball chest pass is a great indicator of how explosive you are in a pressing action. All those same muscle groups are highly active when you're throwing a baseball. So that, a medicine ball overhead throw, and a medicine ball rotational shot put throw, those three right there, if your numbers are improving over the course of the off season, from your baseline number, then you know that your training is working, and you are probably going to be more powerful when you do pick up that baseball again. So understand that you can train for these qualities of speed and power and velocity without having to pick up a baseball. It doesn't have to happen, especially with a lot of these young kids who are at that high school age where they're just growing at an unbelievable rate. At least you would hope so. These kids are all going to improve their med ball velo a lot, and over time that should translate really well to throwing a baseball later on in the off season. But yeah, and then when it comes to sprinting, we have laser timers here, and with these laser timers you can test to see how well their start is, how well they accelerate, and then how quickly they get to top speed, and then how good their top speed is. So obviously out on the baseball field, something like a 30-yard dash is all you would really need to test, because most sprints performed on a baseball field are 30 yards or less. So that's something that we try to prioritize a lot in our testing, is rather than testing 60-yard dash all the time, which is probably a little too far for a baseball game, we try to test a lot more short sprints, 10, 15, 30-yard sprints, and that's our best way to really test to see that you are improving both that acceleration capability and that top speed capability as well. And there's different, we do the pro agility drill in the performance combine. You can also test jumping. Jumping is a real simple one, like a broad jump. We have a jump mat and a G-flight in house. So we have all these things that, yes, you might not be actively throwing a baseball at high intensity for 4 or maybe 6 weeks, but you're still going to be testing other things to make sure that you are becoming more powerful, and I think that matters a lot.
Yeah, especially when we look at like plane specific power, right? So like when we're doing a rotational med ball shot put throw for distance or for velocity, or we're doing something like a lateral high end, right, which is a single leg hop basically from side to side, where if I'm jumping off my right foot, landing on my left foot, or vice versa, jumping off my left foot, landing on my right foot, in a side-to-side manner, we're looking at plane specific power, and we know how important it is to not only test but more importantly train plane specific power in the rotational planes, because baseball is a rotationally dominant sport. So in order to improve things like velocity and exit velocity, we need to work on improving rotational power via a lot of the med ball work that we do. And what's really exciting here is in the next couple of weeks, late September, early October, we're gonna be getting a Proteus in. So we're actually going to be the first facility, not only baseball facility, but also strength and conditioning facility in the entire state of Illinois, right? Aside from the Chicago Cubs, of course, that is going to have access to a Proteus, and we're going to have it right here in-house at Top Performance Strength. So Bill, you want to kind of elaborate on that and some of the, I know this is really exciting for all of us that we're going to have this in-house, and our players are going to have the ability to have access to it.
Yeah, and so that's going to be really exciting too, because now you can really train and test at the same time. You can see, like, right away it pops up on the screen with this Proteus machine, how fast you're rotating or wherever direction you're going, what your acceleration is like within that movement, how quickly you're getting to top speed, and then what your top speed is. So basically a quick rundown of what the Proteus is. Imagine a large turret type of machine, and you can move that handle on the turret any direction you want, up, down, left, right, rotational, whatever you're doing, you can do it. And on that computer screen, you punch in if you want 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds of tension, whatever load you want on that movement, you can have that put onto the machine. So now instead of just testing at one load, we can test at a heavy load, a medium load, and a light load, and now you can test to see if this kid is really good at the light load with the high velocity stuff. Maybe we don't need to train that so much as the heavier loads where they're struggling. And that's just a really simple way to look at it, but you can get as complex as you want with this thing. Like, it is a very, very versatile tool. You can do jumps, punches, whatever movement you want to do. You can probably do it with the Proteus.
Yeah, I'm still really excited. I can't believe that we're actually going to have a Proteus. Being a professional baseball player, it's definitely a coveted piece of technology to be able to train with, and the fact that we're going to be able to have it here in house is going to be absolutely amazing. And I'm excited to see, what the future holds and how we can improve training and performance with all the athletes.
Yeah, shoot, I think like Bryson DeChambeau uses it. I know there's plenty of MLB players that use it. Eric Cressy, obviously, who trains a boatload of MLB players, he has one in-house as well. So we're really excited to have that and kind of see where it goes. But yeah, as far as our kids are concerned, now you're looking at a way that maybe we don't have to train on the Proteus a whole lot, but we can still test you once a week, once every other week, to make sure that all those qualities that translate to throwing a baseball fast, all those qualities are improving. And now, so you're shut down from throwing technically, but we're still improving your velocity in other ways, in ways that are safer, and we can focus on those other areas of training that help keep your shoulder and your whole body healthy and strong too.
Yeah, exactly. And we know the Proteus is a pretty advanced piece of machinery, right? But again, pretty excited to get it in-house, and we're going to be putting together some of our own performance testing protocols. And like we said, you guys are going to be able to, you'll have the ability to have access to it if you continue to train with us over the off season. So a lot of good stuff coming at Top Performance Strength.
Yeah, so I guess kind of to wrap up, there's a lot of things that we talked about today. We talked about an assessment. We talked about making sure you have goals. We talked about what qualities you should really focus on. I think something that a lot of kids are going to want to be left with after this podcast is, okay, so now what is my actual day-to-day process going to be like now that fall ball is over? I would say, like I mentioned before, if you have a good throwing plan and a good routine, all baseball players, at least the good ones, are very routine-based. So if you have a good routine, cut out the intense part of that throwing routine. So definitely go through your warm-up, your band work, your plyo ball reverse throws, and then maybe 10 to 15 light throws. That's all you have to do at this time of year. With those other guys who don't really have a structured throwing program, honestly, I would say just cut out throwing right now. There's no point in just picking up a ball one time a week and long tossing. You're not going to get anything out of it. So I would honestly just say for those guys, put the ball down, and let's focus on strength training. Let's focus on other qualities that we can work on with us here in the weight room. As far as like hitting and fielding are concerned, October is a weird time because it is still nice outside. So I know some kids are going to probably still want to hit. And I know Declan, you talked about this earlier. You can go out and hit a little bit and maybe do some fielding, but you really have to monitor your volume. So instead of taking 80 to 100 hacks with your buddies for 2 hours out in the field, cut that down to 30, 40 swings and just make sure that every swing is high quality as opposed to getting on a tee and doing a bunch of underhand toss for hours on end.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is an interesting time for myself as well. I'm not playing in a fall league, and I'm probably not going to be playing in a winter league, so I'm looking at not having to be ramped up and ready to go until February at the earliest, as late as April, with tryouts. So what I'm doing in order to stay sharp is I'm still hitting every single day, but certain days are lighter than others. Like today, for example, I'll be having live at-bats with Bill. And today's somewhat of a high intensity day with an upper body lift. But then fielding wise, I will cut back and I will just do my routine where I just work hands with a lacrosse ball, and maybe I'll throw the football around and run some light routes as like a warm up to work on catching fly balls. And what I've started to do is on, say, Fridays or Tuesdays, some of my high intensity days, I might take some ground balls outside, but really reserving Sundays as my multi-directional kind of sprint day and incorporating my multi-directional work into my fielding day. So starting with more of like a lateral type warm-up and plyometrics, and then doing a low to medium amount of fielding. That way I still stay sharp and good, because especially with it still being nice out, it's great to be able to use the fields around here. You know, once we get into December and January, February, especially, it's really tough to get outside, especially when it gets icy. It's just not safe. So you're kind of screwed at a certain extent fielding wise, and you have to do the best you can. So you want to utilize it as best as possible. But I know, like in my game, for example, fielding is my strongest tool and asset. So I'm really just trying to maintain that while I'm working on some of my lesser qualities, such as hitting consistently for power and arm strength. So it all comes down to, I think, prioritizing, like we talked about, and figuring out what you need to give most attention to while also staying sharp in some of your other skills. And this all comes down to, you know, reaching out to people like myself, Bill and Kip, so that you can have guidance in order to not only work hard, but work hard and work smart at the same time.
Yeah, and I think, you know, just to wrap up here from my perspective, like condensing down those baseball things, now we're giving ourselves more time to start really focusing on strength training, in my opinion. And I know Kip and I, we talk about this a lot. You know, 4 times a week, I think, is an ideal number of days to come in for strength training, because now we can really focus on an upper-lower split. We can go upper-lower, and now you're really hammering all the qualities that you need. So for any of the kids listening to this wondering how many days a week should I come in to lift with you guys, I think 4 days a week is really going to be that magic number.
Yeah. 4 lifting days would kind of be the max. 6 training days over the course of the week. If we're talking about sequencing for most of our guys that actually do come in 6 days a week, you're going to look at Monday's typically going to be your lower day, so it's a higher intensity day. Tuesday is going to be more of an upper base day, so that might be more of a low to mid intensity day. And then you know, at this point in the off season, being that October is right around the corner, it's probably just going to be more of a movement session day where we focus mainly on recovery and restoring motion on a Wednesday, and then we're going to repeat that cycle. Thursday is a lower day, Friday is an upper day, and then Saturday is going to be a movement day, with it at least within the first month in that, during that early off-season stage of training. And then once we get into month 2 is when we're going to kind of start progressing you towards getting our sprint work back in. And of course, over the course of the off season, that volume is going to pick up. And distance, granted that it's you know, we have some nice days over the course of the winter that we could actually get outside. And like I said, right, taking advantage of the recovery modalities that we offer here as well. And if you're somebody who needs to put on, you know, 25, 30 plus pounds over the course of the off season, and you've got 4 months to do it, well, take advantage of getting in with myself or with Bill and doing a nutrition consultation, right, where that consists of, we'll have you guys fill out a 3-day food log. We'll take a look at what your goals are, and we'll start prioritizing what you need to address. And over the course of time, we'll start putting a plan together for you, so you could have a solid nutrition plan to complement what you're doing in the weight room and your recovery. So essentially, you're checking all your boxes and covering all those 3 pillars from a training, a nutrition, and a recovery standpoint.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys, for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again next week.
All right, fellas, if you like the show, please go ahead and share it. If you have any questions or if there's any topics of conversation that you want us to discuss in the future, please feel free to hit us up, and we'll see you next time.